You're sitting right next to Bruce, so.
As always. Hey, baby.
Y'all are live.
How are we?
Y'all are live.
Oh, okay, hey Laura.
Live in what format?
Sorry?
Live in what format?
YouTube live,
So
yes.
there's a video?
There,
or just-
that is picking y'all up, yes.
Speakers down.
See,
Probably.
it's the view.
Let me make sure how to live you.
I'm gonna get over there and call it.
Oops, what did I do?
How you doing?
Who's the good spot?
Okay, just turned 6 o'clock, all right. Good evening, everybody. This is a special workshop meeting. Today's date is February 15th, 2022. We're going to be discussing the ARPA funds. Lori, would you please call the roll?
Mayor D'Ambra,
Here.
Vice Mayor Stone,
Here.
Councilmember Brandon,
Here via phone.
Councilmember Prince,
Here.
Councilmember Young. Here.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
Motion?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, Mr. Allen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
So in May of 2021, U.S. Treasury issued the interim final rule. Throughout from that period on, there was a lot of feedback, a lot of questions, and so in January of 2022, they issued another final rule, which gave local governments the opportunity to claim up to $10 million in lost revenue. That was different from the calculations that you would have to do for lost revenue. So it gave smaller governments an opportunity to use those in with fewer employees. I know a lot of smaller municipalities were having trouble classifying that money. So we, in the budget process, did have a 3-year plan to utilize those funds. With the new interim rule, we have reclassified these. The uses are the same, but just we claim more as lost revenue. I have a couple of slides that I'll show, and then we can answer questions. So originally, or this year, as this is the reclassification, how we reclassified the funds, the lost revenue, we get 2 tranches of 1.537 million. We claimed that in 2021. So those funds, and I'll show you in a minute, go to the general fund. And then as we move forward in this year, those are the expenses that we have. And then of course we have the next 2 years as proposed expenses. This was done during the budget process. So if you look at kind of our fund balance policy, our general fund, as most of you guys know that have been sitting here, we had, unassigned fund balance. We had a deficit in there for our 2-month operating that we needed to get to. You'll see within the cash that we got from the ARPA funds, it did push our fund balance up. We were proposed to be very positive anyways. So at the year end, we're projected to have 2.136 above our 2-month operating. However, we have made, in the notes here, but the next slide will show. So we have from the 4.3, we did appropriate $995,000 in this year's budget to use those ARPA funds in the 2022 budget. So this is the end of September 30th. So moving forward, as we move into this budget period, we have used $995,000. We have allocated $1.8 million for the fire apparatuses. So that really leaves our unassigned fund balance at $1.496,000 as of, I guess, before we get the second allotment of the ARPA funds. So we will receive the second half of the ARPA funds in the second half of this year. We're projecting maybe May, June, maybe July. We'll see how those funds get released. We do have an audit that we have to do for the first set. That'll be due in April, I think, Hugh, is that right?
Excuse me.
And so once we report those funds and the uses, then they'll start working on giving us a second allotment. So estimated fund balance at the end of this budget year, 2022, would be $3 million. And then of course, as we move into 23, we have some expenses, and then even 24, we have some expenses planned for those funds.
And just so I'm clear, if we go back to the 1.8 for the fire apparatus, once we take possession of that, we'll also then start the loan process, which will then kick that back into.
That's right, yes. So I think we're working on a better time frame for those fire apparatuses, because originally it was 16 to 18 months. I know the fire department's going out there in the next couple of weeks, and once they start that build process, then we'll actually start getting a more up-to-date time, and then we'll be able to shift and start that loan process and have a time for that. So just going with this, I know we've talked about it a couple times. Our 2-month operating as of 2022 would be $2,200,000. We have talked about getting to a 25% or 3 months, which is the common practice. And we haven't brought that policy to you guys yet. We are working on that policy to bring that for approval. Unless there's any objections, that's what we're shooting for. Just a couple other things to consider as we talk about ARPA funds and the flexible uses. We are working on the phase 1 roads, which happens to be in the country club. We're working on analysis with that. Toward the end of the month, we should have the analysis and kind of start formulating the cost. The $255,000 that we have planned for roads will not get that done. We're pretty confident with that. So we will need some additional funding other than the $255,000 that we plan for roads every year. Parks Master Plan is supposed to be approved in April. At that point, once we do the Parks Master Plan, we do have $75,000 in the budget to start construction plans. And once we get those construction plans done, then we'll have an estimated cost for those parks, for that park. So first you got to approve the design or the layout, and then we'll have an engineer that will start, or landscape architect that will start with the drawings and then get the cost for us. We have the SREP process, additional staffing costs for COVID and illnesses. We still have a fire department that is shorthanded due to some illness over there, and so there's some additional costs that we're still incurring for staffing over there. The Palm Beach County Fire Rescue Contract, $240,000 in revenue. They have not acknowledged. They've acknowledged they've got it. They haven't acknowledged what they're going to do with that revenue. So that could be a revenue loss for us if they don't renew that contract with us. The last time, a month or two ago when we first proposed to them, they were going to be over and have a station over there where we had our station over in the BLM. And so they didn't need our fire rescue to provide that service to the unincorporated area. So that was a little scary. I have heard the BLM has kicked them out about 2 weeks ago, so they're not able to use that station anymore. BLM's using it now. And so that's probably good for us, but we're still working through that process. So that's something to consider. That might be a $240,000 loss if we don't receive that contract. Of course, the police pension, the last couple of years, we've been contributing 50%. This year, we will need to contribute 100% to that fund, so that's estimated an additional $100,000. 5-year bridge maintenance, we are working on trying to come up with a bridge maintenance plan. The last couple of years, we put in we put in $60,000, $70,000. We do have some significant bridge improvements that we're going to need to make over the next couple of years, including painting and doing the underside of the bridge. Of course, the inflation and then competitive wages and benefits for our employees are always going to be the challenge in the next couple of probably years, I would say. So with that, I know Molly, you had some, or I'll turn it back over to the mayor and you can decide how you want to handle it.
It's open for council discussion, so I know, Molly, you were the one who raised this issue initially, so I'm gonna let you speak first.
I guess, can you, I wanna talk about revenue loss, because from what I understand, we really didn't have any revenue loss. Or when you originally calculated it per the original formula, you were around like 600,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we truly didn't have 600,000 in revenue loss, correct?
Yeah. Hugh, do you want to talk a little bit about how the claims?
Yeah, so the $600,000 revenue loss was calculated based on a formula that was given by the Treasury to all of the recipients. And so that was a prescribed formula that we use, and it was based on a calendar year basis. Now, the final rule, they've switched for those who dare to calculate the actual revenue loss, which most entities have opted to take the allowance. They can use either the calendar year or the fiscal year, but our initial calculation was based on a calendar year under the interim final rule, which came to a little bit north of $600,000.
And so, but what was our actual revenue loss? Because that was via formula. Did we actually have any revenue loss from COVID? And what was that number if we did?
We looked at it from a budgetary standpoint when we were planning the fiscal 22 budget. However, Treasury, they didn't, their approach did not look at actual. It was based on what they call the counterfactual, which was you take a number and you factored in inflation at a certain growth rate. So the actual, which will be chronicled in the CAFR, ironically, quite a bit of our revenue sources increased. However, what they were looking at the counterfactual, their notion was that it would have increased even more. So, but no municipality, most looked at the actual loss for budgetary purposes, but for the Treasury, we had to look at what they call the counterfactual, which is based on growth rate, a set growth rate, which was calculated by using a 3-year moving average.
So we did have some increased expenses, but in terms of absolute revenue, we did not experience a revenue loss. The only reason we were showing loss is because of their algorithm that they gave us to work with.
Exactly.
Well, didn't we have some losses like with sales receipts or something like that coming from the state, or did that go up?
They were
I mean,
negligible.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
that's what I'm
loss were
saying.
negligible compared to what was initially.
Loss compared to what was budgeted, but not maybe what could have been.
Precisely, Vice Mayor.
And they're still, even with this change, you're still using the algorithm, however, that they put forth, correct?
No, what they've done was, a lot of the municipalities caught considerable grief. The first item of contention was that the Treasury wanted us to calculate it on a calendar year basis. So they had to annualize the revenues. And so what the Treasury did in the final rule was they gave the recipients, the municipalities, the chance to, the option of going calendar year or fiscal year.
Right, but aside from the year change, the basis on which you calculate the loss was still the same. It was just a switch in which time period you use. Is that a fair?
Yes, the basis is the same. It's the same. You still have the counterfactual there. But I would venture to say that perhaps all of the municipalities will opt for the $10 million allowance.
Okay, and so then my other, I'm just bringing this stuff up because I feel like we didn't talk about last time, and it affects our taxpayers at the end of the day, so I feel like it's worth making sure we walk through it because I wasn't aware of the tax. We can't lower taxes. Jeremy, can you elaborate on that too? So, I mean, I think everyone knows, but just so it's on, I think it's on the agenda too.
Yeah, it's on the staff report, but the cliff notes of it is if you take this money and use it, you can't lower taxes without showing what step you have taken to counteract that, meaning you can't use this money to be the factor that lowers taxes. If you had increased your revenues or significantly lowered your expenditures, you can still lower those taxes. And so that's the gist of it.
So if our revenue increases because of something comes online, then you have the ability to use that
yes.
So, pretty much everything we're using it for would be based on revenue, right? Like everything we're using it for, we would be held to that we can't lower taxes because unless we find another source that we raise funds.
That's right.
Right. So it just, I'm not saying not take the money, but at the same time, we technically didn't have revenue loss. And so we're like, yay, free money. Now we can, do things that we didn't get to do before, but now our taxpayers are going to pay for it because we're not going to lower taxes. So I just want to talk through it some more and make sure we're really, really putting the money where it's important. Because I don't know, maybe that tax rule was always there and I personally didn't realize it the first time. I don't know if it came with the very final ruling. But I feel like it deserves a closer look, since if we're taking the money at the end of the day, like, it's hurting the taxpayers because we're not going to lower taxes, probably.
I think for a majority of municipalities, and part of the purpose of why they passed this was to help a lot of municipalities who are already in a bad financial position. And there was an opportunity to do that. Good, right, or wrong, it did help
Basically unrelated to really
completely
COVID and
unrelated
stuff.
to
It was an
Yeah.
opportunity.
good, right, or wrong, that has definitely
Yeah.
helped, I believe, the village request to get into a better financial position. And I think you're correct, we need to make sure we're putting it, to make sure that we are putting ourselves in a better financial facilities, utilities position.
Right. So I think that's kind of, at the end of the day, I want to make sure we're really putting it towards stuff that, like, the taxpayers are really going to benefit from, like roads, infrastructure, like stuff that they will 100% see, feel, and it will touch them, that we use this money for that.
So I guess how much of this is going towards salaries and benefits?
So only salaries and benefits that
Would just be
Well-
the pension?
would be the
That's-
business liaison person. That was the only
That's it.
one. And then we were very specific when we were doing this, even during the budget process of laying out, we wanted, one-time expenses. Obviously, that one was a different one because of the business aspect of it, but all these are one-time expenses. It was the plan for it.
So I think if you look at it, we're improving our own financial position, we're using it obviously to accelerate some of the capital investments we need to make, but I think to your point, Molly, we're gonna have things like Sea Glass come online, the Mastriani building, Ostrey, the 300 building maybe ultimately. So I think once we get through 2024, if we find as those things come online that we've got revenue in excess of our needs, obviously that's where we can look at reducing taxes at that point in time.
Right, not till, because when did we stop getting the funds? 2024?
What's the
3 years?
ruling
I
on
thought
that?
Three years.
3 years.
From the time that you received it, the first tranche. You
use it,
could,
right.
to allocate it, you have 5 years to use it.
What's the can't lower tax, period?
So if
I
we,
don't know, I'll have to check on that one. I don't think it's
Like a 10-year
drawn
thing.
out. I think it's just a label there, but, I
that's
would guess,
that's a good question, because if you use it in 3 years,
right.
even though you could allocate it over 5,
Yeah, I
once
think
you
it's
get to the end of that
3 years.
3 year, then are you free to?
To do with it.
Yeah.
That'd be good to know.
Just to get
No,
cleaner.
that's a good
It's
question.
not.
I'm sure there's no answer to it right now, but we can pose the question, let somebody come up with start working on that, but I'm guessing it's 3 years from the time that you accepted the money.
Well,
Accept it or use it.
once we get
I would say accepted it, but we'll double check.
with the new revenue coming online, like Sea Glass and all these other projects and stuff, it seems like to me, based on the numbers that we looked at, that we should really be pretty strong from, cash flow, that we might have a possibility of reducing the taxes
Yeah,
moving
eventually,
forward, which would be kind of great. I mean, there's not many municipalities that are able to do that.
I think our long-term outlook is good. I think we still have a few years of really trying to create this, I'll say culture, but just create this process of this long-term planning, step-by-step approach. There's a couple of things that are out there that we don't know, like the roads, things.
Roads are a big thing.
The parks thing, we can't put that into our master plan until we have that plan developed, and then of course the bridge. I mean, those are 3 things that will really help with our, long-term planning. And then of course, whatever the charrette comes out of the charrette, I doubt that'll be a huge impact financially for the village more than just shaping the village. But I think those 3 things financially will help us get on track, and then right around, a couple of years with Sea Glass coming online, I think we'll be in a lot better shape in a couple of years. I just think there's some expenses that we, that were such backlogged that we're finally starting to address them, and now it's just gonna take a year or 2 and just.
Just thinking after I opened my mouth and said we might be able to do tax, thinking about all the utility costs and stuff that we've got that's coming up. I mean, you know, tens of millions of dollars and stuff, repair work and stuff.
But that's separate from the.
Yeah,
roads.
I understand that it's separate, but
It's the
it's
roads.
still, I don't know how the numbers actually and stuff work towards that, but I would think you should be able to move some of it around.
Theoretically, it runs as an independent entity. But I mean, the other thing you've got in the short term, given the inflation rate, is you're gonna have some pressure, obviously, on wages.
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna be too high inflationary.
I
It's
don't
now right
know.
now, but not spread out.
We'll have a template with that because Jupiter's has PBA and they're opening already. They're already started because of the issues they had. And I mean, just talking with them, they're gonna try to give quite a bit. Garden's gonna reopen their contract to give them more money, their police. So there'll be some pressures on us to increase our salaries.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what?
Right or wrong.
The producer price index came out today, what, 9.1, 9.2? So it was a big number.
So my recommendation with this and, you know, is if there are, you know, things as we get into budget process, I would say we kind of leave this alone until the budget process because there are things out there. But if there, as we get into the budget process with these funds, if there's something specific that we should be targeting, you know, we're all ears. I mean, it's a discretion of council how we use these funds.
I mean, I still wanna see an actual, and I think after this study on the roads with Country Club, an actual 20-year schedule to replace the roads and how much it legitimately would cost to get on a schedule like that. I know 250,000 is not enough, and we're not doing. I think that's something bucket we need to fill.
Well, I think in talking with Doug, if we were just doing roads, and obviously inflation's changing the course of that, but if all the roads were just like what we're doing out here, mill and pave, it was $255,000 a year. The kicker is those roads in the country club are the one factor that are gonna be twice as much. They're gonna be $550,000 to do that same amount of roads. And so once we get through that chunk of roads, then it becomes very easy to project over a 20-year period, and it won't be that trajectory or that big bump with the roads. And so that's why this analysis will be it'll be big for the Sequesta, just for the planning aspect. We know what resources we need to put toward those roads because we need to get over that hump.
I know you were just throwing a general number out there, but it's gonna be a lot of money in Tequesta Country Club to fix all the utilities in there. It's gonna be a big number. I think it'll be.
Fix what utilities?
Well, you know, the roads and stuff, they're sinking and stuff in there because of the infrastructure. I mean, like the drainage in there, you know, it's settling. You got big potholes and all through there. All that's gonna have to be dug up, and all that pipe's gonna have to be redone. You're talking about a lot of money to do all that before you even start on the roads. If you don't fix all that first, the roads are gonna do the same thing. And so, I mean, it's gonna be a big number. I would think in excess, probably $1 million, $5 to $2 million.
Well, that grant that we put in for the country club was $14 million. So
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yes, it would.
I really only have one request, when we talk about all this, is I just wanna make sure that the 5 of us are cautious when we're thinking about putting ARPA funds towards wages, because it's not a revenue source. So if we were to put it towards wages, it might not be sustainable. That's why I was hesitant when we were looking at the business liaison position and hiring someone with that position, and then just pray that the budget can help support that position for many years past the ARPA funds timeline, because yeah, that's pretty much where I stand. And then project wise, like Kyle said, when we start to get numbers from the budget and certain projects that might need a little extra boost, I would probably make my decision or lean towards one or the other, kind of where we can put the money.
Yeah, when I brought that up, where I wasn't bringing up with the idea that we should use ARPA funds to pay salaries, we were using those primarily for these one-time expenditures, but it was just an acknowledgement that when we look at the budget overall, we're gonna have some of those pressures because of what's happening.
And that's why I'm trying to say that though, because we could do that, but then if you look long-term,
No, I agree, that's
if our
not,
budget every year can't handle that, that puts us in a predicament.
no, I agree with you
Yeah,
100%.
so I'd rather have us strong on that end and just use these funds for kind of playing catch up on other things.
And we were always gonna, assess that position after it's been a full year, right? And then I just wanna be clear, if could we still do like the rollback rate? Cause that we technically wouldn't be reducing taxes in, right? You would still be getting the same amount, so would that still be possible?
There's a difference of opinion, we're working on trying to find that,
We can.
to make sure we're gonna check with them to see if they classify as rolling back taxes as lowering taxes. So we'll find out.
Okay, that would be helpful to know.
I met with some managers today and half the crew said it was, half the crew said it wasn't. So we're gonna go back to the drawing board, see if it is, but.
Go for it.
And then in this what, is this all just roads? I can't remember what is all in this line item.
Which one?
The provide essential government services, public safety, is this all just for roads or what all is in these numbers?
So that was a big part of that one was roads, the public safety, public works, I
So
believe.
all three of these is strictly roads,
No,
nothing else?
not necessarily roads, I mean, it was public safety and, fire. Cause when we were doing the classifications, you still have to lump it as like an essential service, was that right, you?
Yes.
So, but you don't have I guess that's what I wanna get at, is like, what are we spending this on, or do we not know, or just summing it right now and it's to be determined still?
So you, I don't know,
So,
I'll give.
For us to claim the first tranche of 1.5
Right.
million, we have to give it a category. And so the category on the revenue side is lost revenues. And on the expense side, you can utilize lost revenues on what they call essential government services. And so essential government services is pretty much what we're in the business of doing, public safety, public works. So what we have done is we have simply allocated a prorated portion over the fire and police budget, just to show the auditors that we have in fact enough expenditures for those functions to cover the lost revenues. And what they see that as essential government services is public safety, public works, parks and rec. Anything that we're in the business of providing is essentially essential government services. However, looking to next budget year, the funds will be there because the funds are is being washed through fund balance.
Yeah.
So it's there, the cash is there, and will be available for appropriation for this coming budget
Okay, so we
cycle.
can move this around, like it's
Right.
not
Yeah.
accounted for anything
Right.
right now.
Yes, so it's more of a,
Talking about because we don't, for the minutes, we're not really sure.
and I can send you the
Let's,
presentation.
file the agenda, please.
So we tag, I mean, this is layman's terms, I'm not the accountant, but layman's terms, we have to label it something, so we label it, so everybody's seeing the same slide.
But what you're looking for, Molly, ultimately is itemized expenditures.
Yeah, what are we spending it on? I think we should know and we should all
Yeah.
be able
Let's
to look
just-
at it before the money's committed. That's
So-
my opinion though.
Well, I mean, in layman's terms, we're taking this money, it comes in, we already have the money, so now we're taking $342,000 to balance the budget.
You're taking the 1.5.
Well, the 1.5 is in, like he was saying, that's an unassigned fund balance already, so if you look at the next slide, that's where it's already there. So now, as we move into 2022, we're using those funds, $995,000 to balance the budget. So how you tag it doesn't matter, it's just we're using those funds are all part of the budget process, the budget. So the 342, it's a revenue that helps
Yeah,
balance
it's
an
just-
expense, so.
Placeholder that we have and it hasn't been committed yet,
Well, 955,000 has been
has
committed.
been from the 1.5.
And so the 342 is just taking some of our expenses and we're matching that so it balances a zero. So, I mean, it's not a specific project or anything else, it's a revenue going into our budget to help budget, it's basically helping us balance the budget. So to have an itemized, I mean, we can tell you $342,000 coming out of the police department. That's
For what?
to balance the budget. We're using
I guess my point is not
342,000.
being taken, like, I feel like we should know exactly what everything is going towards, cause we're taking money, free money for,
Well, you kind of have it listed in 2022. I mean, you got stormwater, 150,000.
yeah,
You got police vehicles,
I'm
240.
mostly, like, this is the one that's really kind of the bottom one.
You're talking about the
It's just
bottom.
She's talking about
yeah.
342, and
Right.
what I'm saying is we're taking
Got it.
342 to help balance the budget, and we're classifying as, we're taking those expenses out of public safety, fire, police, and saying that those expenses, we're gonna be able to claim as lost revenue, and so it just helps us balance the budget.
But that 342 does not have specifics assigned to it yet.
It won't have specifics,
You say it never will.
just like
Is
in
that what-
2023.
Yeah, that's what I don't like
That's what she's
about it.
asking,
It's
it
just
doesn't
going to
have
balance the
specifics to
budget,
it.
but it's like, these are, I don't know, I just feel like we should be putting
if
towards
I-
things that we know that
If I
it's
could
going
jump
to.
in,
And like, I am, this is,
I get what you're saying.
I'm not a finance person, I'm not a politician, like, I just, to me, in my head, it makes sense if we're taking money and we can't lower the taxes for the taxpayers because we're taking the money, like, it should go towards stuff that they are gonna benefit from.
But the departments that are listed for the 342, when we get the budget during the budget process, they always get sent to us with the itemized, right? So essentially, it's a big hole, we'll see where everything's going. Is that gonna help? I mean, but you don't have it now because you haven't done the actual budget for each
Yeah.
department yet.
No, for 2022.
You have it for the current
You have the
fiscal
amount,
year.
but you don't have what it's going to. So if the police give us their budget, we see every little thing that they need the budget for.
Well, I guess I'd say if we didn't get this money, we would have had to balance the budget regardless.
Right.
So that's why I'm like, why do we have to use this to
So
balance
if we
the
didn't
budget?
have the 342, we had to cut $342,000 from the budget somewhere.
Right,
So-
that we would have had to do regardless if we didn't get this
But
money.
would it be fair to say that you're washing it through
Hmm.
under that label, but then that money may be being used for roads, or it may be being used for those one-time capital expenditures, but you can't, but that's not an essential service, so this is, so you wash it through.
Well, I think.
Is that a fair way of saying it, you, I mean,
yes, and to quickly interject, what the Treasury has done, and all of the questions that you brought up was what was the big point of vexation, was cities were saying, we have four major categories, where can we put the money? And so as they started to move the funds around into what Councilmember Youngin was saying, they said, you know, it's tough for us to meet these categories. So what the Treasury said was, tell you what, you have 10 million, you could give it a broad category and call it lost revenues, and you could use the funds for anything that you typically would do on a day-to-day basis, be it to run recreational programs, to pay for salaries for police and fire. So a lot of municipalities, what they're doing is they're saying to the auditors, we know we're gonna have more than $10 million over 3 years to pay for, to run our parks program, to pay for police and fire. So we're gonna throw that into a bucket and say, we use it to provide essential government services. So when the auditors come, they're going to say, show us how you provided essential government services. And we're gonna show them the ledger for police, fire, parks, and with some of the expenses like the police vehicles, we have what we call a project number tied to those expenses. So we press a button and those expenses we're gonna be able to print out to show the auditors. On the other hand, for what Councilmember Young is saying, for police and fire, for us to split up the expense line, it's gonna be difficult when it comes to budget for the following year because we're trying to track the expenses in the same line. So the point is that almost all governments are gonna use their funding to provide essential services. And that's just a catch-all to say, continue doing what you're doing, but you could use the money for what you see best meets your needs.
well, you're thinking of this like a business person. Okay,
Probably.
which I completely understand. Don't think of this like a business person, think of this as like the government responding, really politically driven, okay, to provide funding across the board to all these states and municipalities. And it basically becomes a big fund of, you can use it for whatever you want. So if you're technically spending on these services, you've now freed up $342,000 elsewhere that you can now use for sidewalks or roads or whatever. And you know, those are one-time expenditures, and once they're done, then they come back over to fund police and fire or whatever it is.
Right, and that makes sense,
Mhm.
so long as that's
Exactly.
happening.
Right, and so I think that's all you're trying to get at is, we've had revenue's been the same, we've got a surplus of a stimulus. How are we spending that stimulus, down to the penny? And I think that's,
I think it's just been too high level to this point, and I think I mean,
well, so the 342 is about 2% of this whole budget.
Yeah.
That's just being lumped in, and I get that.
Yeah.
From a management side of complexity.
And Councilmember Young, with the tracking, whatever you specify the projects each year or the individualized expenditure items, we're gonna attach a project number to those. Right now, the ARPA project number is like 90003. So in any given year, you're gonna say, show me what you spent on ARPA. We're gonna specifically pull that project number. So it's gonna have all of those individualized projects attached to that expenditure project number.
But it kind of goes back to your first issue you raised, which is we didn't have a reduction of revenue. Our revenues went up. But they gave us an algorithm to calculate it, which God knows where they got those numbers from. But that's what they gave us, and that's what everybody's using. So you're right. In the traditional accounting sense, I agree with you.
How much did we increase our unassigned fund balance over the last couple of years?
So this would be the picture. So that's why we took that 1.5, become fund balance. If you really start subtracting the actual expenses that we had versus the fire apparatus, I mean, you see we still have 1.4 versus last year it was negative 330,000. You know, so we obviously have, I guess, so in my way of looking at it, especially like you mentioned earlier, once the fire apparatus come off, there's going to be some discretionary spending that council can do as we move forward, whether it's parks or that's why I kind of put some of these things just to really start thinking about, putting it toward roads or parks or whatever the process is. We haven't hit that point yet. When we get this next tranche, we'll really be able to start really saying, all right, what is important to you guys? We know based off the strategic plan, which we'll update again, but I guess the part is, a decision that we'll have to make is if we want to increase our fund balance to 3 months, obviously we wouldn't be there yet. If we want to leave it at 2 months, now we got almost $800,000 in discretionary spending, minus what we're doing in 22, 23 still. I mean, there's still some expenses that are not on this sheet that we have already budgeted for, but there'll be some discretionary spending. So, if we don't increase our fund balance, which I think our recommendation is, but if we don't, then there's, several $100,000 in discretionary spending that still can come. And I hear you, not salaries or personnel costs, but actual tangible projects that, we can show the public. And we've already started with some of that, using the money for roads and stormwater and some things like that, but continuing that for the next 2 years as well.
Yeah. And if there's legitimate compelling needs, maybe we, instead of going all the way up to 3 months, maybe we go to 2.5, knowing sea glass is coming online, and we can hit the 3 month mark when sea glass steps up. So we'll have options to consider.
I mean, is there anything that's not on this list and the other potential list that you pulled up that, I think, do we even have our the things that we need done, like sidewalks, roads, all our projects? I mean, are they prioritized with level of importance? I mean, I know the roadmap is, but versus, stormwater, whatever the case. I mean, are we, should we just be picking off a list from top, bottom?
That's what the capital improvement plan's for.
Right.
So if the priorities change when we do the budget and and you guys see the capital improvement plan, you go, I don't want to do number 1, I want to do number 3. We prioritize it that way. So we have a priority that we've set up a year or 2 ago with the capital improvement plan. We're going to run through that unless it changes. That can be changed every year, ideally, it's a 5-year plan, but if there's a different priority, we can change that. There is one for water and there's one for stormwater as well, so if those priorities change, we can change that in the budget process.
So like, does the stormwater outweigh the roads? Like, that's what I'm saying, like, what should we be focusing on most? I mean, you already are with the stormwater and the roads, but I guess I just wanna make sure we have the list and we all agree on it, and,
Yeah, when we go through the budget process this year, we'll have a chance to basically weigh in on all those elements.
And I can almost assure you, my recommendation is to increase the funding for roads. I mean, that's gonna be, in order to get to that next phase, we're gonna have to do more than the 255 that we were setting aside every year. That's in the capital plan. I mean, it probably needs, I don't know what this phase will be, but really like to get over that hump. But we'll obviously have to see, you know, a lot of other factors that come into play. But I think, you know, even talking with Matt with stormwater, I mean, there's a couple of stormwater projects that aren't funded in the next 5 years that we'd really like to, you know, tackle. It's not a huge priority, but, you know, with lack of funding in the stormwater fund, I mean, there would be a very good argument made to use it for some stormwater projects. So I think we're working through some of those, and with budget, we'll have some recommendations, and then you guys can decide which direction you guys want to go.
You know how Doug put together that great road chart with the phases and the colors? Has Matt done something like that, and what he would prioritize his different areas?
He does have something.
He does have that.
He has water and
We have
stormwater.
I know the distribution system.
A few months ago, he gave it.
Yeah, he actually showed us a breakdown of all the costs and stuff associated with all that.
I've never seen the costs. I just remember seeing it kind of laid out visually.
I don't think it was as colorful as.
Well, yeah, and then it's public
Do you
record.
remember we're
I-
talking about
when-
some of the fire lines not getting the full level?
Right,
That was part of.
that was part of it.
Yeah.
I just know if with those items becoming public record, being able to show residents those types of visuals in simple terms, rather than looking at numbers on a piece of paper, it's a little bit easier to look at it and go, oh,
And understand.
oh, that's why our neighborhood's not getting done, because there is a neighborhood over there and they're in that color, and just try to help be more transparent about where we're going with all that. Because there's piping, most people don't know, oh, there is their piping there, oh, okay. There's a ditch there, oh, I didn't know that, because they don't live there. So it just kind of helps educate everybody on what we have.
Well, I know, you know, going back to the roads and stuff again, Jeremy, is that I know they're supposed to be going out and doing some test holes and things like that.
We're
borings
done with
and-
that now.
Yeah, and that's gonna give you a lot of information and stuff that you're gonna need in order to make a closer cost to what it's gonna take to improve all that and fix it.
We're thinking it's not as bad as we originally thought, but it's not great.
It's still bad.
So we didn't get all the muck
So
and
we got
mud
time.
and all
Did
that
they-
stuff.
did they-
No.
Did they TV any of the lines or anything to see what the pipe looks like on the inside, or they just do corings?
Well, Loxahatchee has TV'd their lines, and they're supposed to be providing us analysis for their lines. They think their lines are fine. They think that most of them, huh?
So it's just loose, uncompacted soil and stuff around the pipes and stuff that are
That's
causing
what
all
we're
the dips?
seeing. That's what we're
So that'll
seeing.
be a big deal if you don't have to replace the pipes.
Well, yeah, but then you guys.
Just pull it up but it's gonna be a nightmare going there and tearing all those streets up. You still have to really maintain accessibility.
You guys can park in front of the village hall and walk back home.
I can start a shuttle service or something, now that I'll be retired from council now.
As long as you put your dog in the shuttle.
There you go.
And then I know with the business liaison position, it is rolling a little more into Parks and Rec, I think, than I anticipated. So it bothers me a little bit. I know it's very vocal from the beginning, I'm for this position if it's mostly business. So I think it's rolling into Parks and Rec, which we need. Like, we don't not need Tessa to help with Parks and Rec, but I mean, can we pay for like half of the salary from the ARPA funds? And then, because I have a problem with all of the ARPA funds going towards that if like half of her job is Parks and Rec. That's just my personal opinion. And that I made that clear from the very start too.
So I guess, you know, from my standpoint, what is it that we want the business liaison person doing that they're not doing? That would be my question to you guys. I mean, and I want to be respectful, I'm not, but what is the vision for the business liaison person? Because I can't have the business liaison person doing it if I don't know what the vision is. So to me, you know, when we originally talked about it, it was, you know, talking to businesses, they're out doing that, promoting Shop VOT, we got a sidewalk sale coming up, you know, getting in Rotary Club, those types of things. she's doing all that. So if there's something else that she needs to be doing, I need to be given that so that way we can do it. So, you know, there's gonna be a month or two when we open this rec center that she's gonna be very focused on the rec center. But in the meantime, even leading up to it, I mean, she was out the last 2 Fridays going door to door to businesses. I think that was always the intent, is increase that communication. So when the bridge does close, we have a very good line of communication open for that. I mean, to me, that's what it is. It's not going out and promoting the businesses and, you know, doing all that for them. They need to do that, but it's having a line of communication. They know how that they're represented the local government. And so, you know, if there is something that we're not doing, then
I think my idea is just like that, having that communication line where business person knows who to contact. Just for information, just, hey, I've got this issue, who do I talk to? That customer service side of things, but also I think there's a continued need to let the residents know what businesses are here. It's more of that connecting the residents to the businesses and then the businesses to the village.
and we're still, I mean, we're slowly transitioning her into doing like the business highlights and things like that. I know Lori's still doing some of that, but at some point she'll be doing all that too. And so, you know, letting them know what businesses are here, you know, I think reaching out, having the chamber be a part of it, you know, she can be a liaison for the chamber. I mean, so I think we're doing some of those things, but if there's something else that we want her to do, you know, I'm all ears if this is what the vision for the council is for that position.
Well, you said, you know, her job is not to promote individual businesses, but the other element too is obviously to make the businesses more aware of how they can participate in and take advantage of a lot of the programs and things that we do, whether it's the food trucks or movies in the park or other activities that they might be able to step forward and get more involved with, which will then obviously help their visibility in the community, so.
And I remember the job description being pretty spot on. So, and I think it's hard because we don't see what she does every day, so it's probably hard for us to tell you what she's not doing. At least for
Are
me.
you getting emails that she's sending?
I do. I'm getting the emails now, but
For me, it's a lot of behind the scenes, and for me, it leaned more on our village events, because we do welcome vendors and local businesses, and for me, it was a point person for them to communicate to that one person. Even if a business has an issue, they could contact that person, which would then communicate with our manager and figure out a solution. And also with the events, just figure, like, that's the person for vendors. Bring the businesses in, whether it's a service or a product, and that person is helping them understand what they need to bring, where they need to be, help, like, that way it takes that off of Greg. And it's all business related. It's not anything that has to do with the events for the families or the kids or the residents or the food trucks. It's just for where the vendors will be and what they need in assisting them, and keeping it clear, concise for anything they need. And then the door-to-door and like the hands-on contacts, going to them, explain, hey, we have a sidewalk sale we want to do. Here's the information. Contact me if you have any questions or if you want to participate. So for me, it's a lot of behind the scenes, but then it's really just solely focused for me on vendors for the businesses.
But I think initially when we said we were gonna do this.
But we aren't
and we
having
were-
events right
and
now.
We were gonna do this for the 3 years. We knew she was also gonna play a role, obviously, with Parks and Rec in a more traditional sense. So I think if I recall, we said, let's do this, let's continually evaluate the effectiveness of this, because we've, you know, again, we tried to do, you know, this business group within the community and nobody's stepping up. So I mean, we run this for 3 years, we see where it is. We know we're gonna need some additional resource in parks eventually. But again, that's 3 years. We can use this money to pay for this role. 3 years down the road, we'll have Sea Glass, we'll have other things coming online. So if we have a source of funding, if this becomes primarily a parks position at that
The
point.
only thing my concern is I want to see it sustained until at least the bridge closes.
Oh, I agree.
Right.
No, I said, we got 3 years.
That way there's someone.
So that's why, like,
Yeah.
I'm not in panic mode, or
No.
I don't wanna say panic mode, but, you know, not disappointed right now. Our businesses aren't participating. They're not, I mean, you know, one person shows up, even every time she sends out an email, we're not getting a lot of response. I'm not overly disappointed at this point, you know, it's about open line communication. So the bridge is the big factor. I mean, even Amy, going back to her, she's always wanted to lean forward to the bridge closing. I mean, she's very concerned about that. So planting the seed with a business liaison person is really just about, you know, having that line of communication. So if
And
there's
that-
something else that needs to be there,
Yeah.
you know, let me know. I mean, I'm more than happy to task her with that. I don't want anybody to fault her because she's only been tasked what I've been tasked to give her, so,
Right.
I mean. at
But
this
I think
point-
until we start having our events through the seasons, in just like Mr. Stone was saying, how do we bring the businesses to the residents? A big part of that is putting them in front of the residents, which is our events. So for me, even when the bridge is closed, until we start our events, which is all localized, and residents go to it, I mean, that's a big push, I think. And I think
Yeah.
businesses it'd be very smart for them to participate. And now it might take our business liaison going to them a few times till they finally go, oh, this is a real thing now. They mean business. Okay. I mean, it's not just someone talking once and they go, oh, yeah.
Well,
If she keeps being consistent, which she just started, so we'll see how she does. But if she's consistent with the communication to the businesses, then it'll start to sink in.
But ultimately, it is up to the, even with her communicating, it's up to the businesses to leverage the opportunities that are
absolutely.
there. And again, it's just like with the business group, we got one person showing up.
And
If the businesses don't take advantage of it, again, you know,
Well, we'll
you
pivot.
can lead a horse to water, but you can't make
Yeah,
it
but I
drink.
think with her outreach though,
But-
and you know,
But it's new, we just,
yeah,
I mean,
it's
we're
new.
just starting
But
this program.
I brought it up just in relation to ARPA funds though,
Yeah.
is I think the role's important. I think we all think the role's important, and I'm okay with ARPA funds being spent on that role, even though it's not a one-time cost, so long as the businesses, again, the residents of business are seeing that direct benefit from the ARPA funds. But if it rolls into a lot more of a Parks and Rec, I have a problem using ARPA funds
And
for
I
that.
was hesitant with that as
Yeah.
well in the beginning because of just where was this going, and for me it was a sustainability for that position after the ARPA funds timeline. It's then what do we do with that person, and does our budget handle that person's position in the future? Maybe roll into something else.
Well, I mean, we'll have sources of funds, you know, going forward that could underwrite the cost of that position, whether it stays a hybrid or whether it becomes more Parks and Rec. But again, we'll evaluate it over these 3 years, and again, as Kyle said, you know, we definitely wanna keep this position and allow it to develop and bloom, hopefully, leading into that bridge closure, because we know that's gonna be a hard impact on our community, so.
Maybe even the bridge after that.
Yeah.
I heard somebody at the bridge told me that, after they get done with this bridge, they're gonna start working on A1A.
The engineer who actually designed the bridge, I was with him on Sunday, and he did mention after this one bridge, their plan is to start looking at the alternate A1A bridge.
That gave me heartburn.
He
That gave
did
me-
not say right after, he just said that would be the next bridge to be done in the area.
Well, let's hope there's a little time gap there.
So I guess just to sum it up, because obviously I think I'm the one who's most hung up on what we're spending the funds on. When we start the budget process in May, right? So you'll have more of like an itemized list then of
We
what.
start the budget process in March, you guys will probably
See
see
it in
the
May.
first in June is our
June,
first
okay.
meeting that we do.
So you'll have kind of a more itemized, this is what,
Yeah, we can show it and break it out.
I mean, it'll wash through, but you should be able to see then, okay, we're washing it through, but where are we then spending it? What are the one-time or capital investments that we're
yeah,
making?
I just want that to be super clear.
Yeah, no, I agree. I understand what you're
I'm
saying.
fine with that. I think we should see where it's washing through.
And I think in this current year budget, I think we have that. So, but as Jeremy said, when we get to the next round, we get another chance, another bite at the apple to see if we still agree with the same prioritizations and
Sure.
all the rest.
This was the budget this is how it was for this budget, right, or no?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
how it was presented to you guys,
Right.
we had to reclassify it this other way, or we didn't have to, but we did because of the lost revenue portion of
So
it,
yeah,
that
and
gives
this
us
is what we all
more,
agreed to.
gives us
for
more
this year.
flexibility, cause we had to, via the auditors, claim all 1.5 in 2021, but we didn't actually start spending it until 22, so that's why that change is because the auditors required us or asked us to receive the funds in 2021, so that's why it's different, so it looks like that now versus the other way.
Yeah. We'll find out on the rollback rate, so we'll know
Yep.
that for sure.
We will find out.
Exactly, will do.
Molly, what is your thought on the rollback rate? Because obviously, if we rolled back and kept our revenue at the same level, given the fact we're gonna be facing increased expenses, I understand the desire to reduce taxes ultimately, but that requires additional revenue streams. What are you thinking? I mean,
Well,
I
made it
agree we need an
clear
answer,
when we approved
but-
the budget that I wanted staff to be thinking about it throughout the year of where we can make cuts to possibly, you know, do the rollback rate, or not even the entire rate, but like maybe drop it a little bit,
Yeah.
right, to help the taxpayers. Cause I just remember when I was going through, and I went through every single line on the budget, there were some where we, like, on the budget, we got to like 50% use, but we still asked for all the money again this year. So I kind of want to really assess those columns, like if the last year and this year, we're not using that whole budget, like,
well, I
see
guess
what
what
we
I'm
can cut
thinking, like,
costs.
we know we've got roads, we've got all these, we've got a lot of infrastructure and capital work that was deferred because of, the Great Recession, and we're trying to catch up with all that. So I guess I'm wondering, I understand what you're saying. We do need an answer to that question. It was a great question. So we do need to know what impact it would have. But I guess what I'm thinking is this the time to limit our revenue stream, or do we wanna kind of maintain it going forward? And then, like I said, when we get these other things online, and maybe we have some truly excess revenues, is that the time to look at? I'm just throwing it out as a question.
Yeah, and that's for everyone to individually decide, not you won't be here.
Well,
But no, and I'm not saying like, this is absolutely what I wanna do, period, and certain, like, I don't know, let's track it.
Yeah.
Staff should be thinking about throughout the year, where are we not spending our whole budget on each line, because we didn't last year, but we asked for all the money this year, and maybe we don't spend it all again, so where does that money go? Can that go towards roads, or can we, like I said, not do the whole rollback rate, but maybe reduce it a little bit? I mean, I just think we owe
That's a very valid
the
point, I mean,
residents, like, the due diligence, even if we don't end up being able to, at least like, hey, we really looked at this and really tried, and
Oh, I agree with you. I agree with you.
that's just, yeah, that's how I operate.
We do that process every year. I mean, when I first got here, we made significant cuts the first 2 years I was here.
Sure.
So it's not like we're not looking at, any ways to save, so we'll continue.
I was not insinuating that you weren't, anyway.
Okay. Any other thoughts, comments?
Good.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Hi.
All in favor?
Aye.
Seconded that.
Thank you, everybody.
You can't second. Oh, you can't. Oh, I'll second it then. I
Oh, I thought, did
I
you,
thought
I
someone
thought you
said
I
said,
made a
Okay.
motion to adjourn.
thought I heard a second. Maybe I did.
I thought it
was
did too.
asking who seconded.
All in favor, aye, okay.
Is that my stack or do I have a stack? This is that.
I just sat down
I just sat
Lori, that is your stack right there of magnets.
Oh.
Magnets.
You got a whole stack?
Well, we hand them out.
Is this,
Nobody wants to come to Village Hall to get one.
Hey,
Last
so
So
they
they told me,
the number is really
they told me that,